And let's get ready to rumble. Woo! All right. I've always wanted to say that, always. This is a no holds barred cage fight. To the death? No, not really. But we are going to try and have some fun. We've had a great, very full 3 days. We're at the end of the 3 days. We did this very purposefully to try and design a panel that was going to be both hopefully insightful and inspiring and informative and fun. And I have to say, a big shout out to Mr. Tom Anderson, who came up with the idea, said, Lenny, let's do this. And thought, yeah, let's do this. Let's talk about these next generation methods and why each one works, why they don't. Let's challenge people. This is going to be interactive. I have questions for them, but I want you to have questions as well. So as we get started, I'll do a quick first name intro, and there we'll circle back around. So we have Neil, some insights. We have Michaelis, we have Mark, we have Tom, and we have Steve. So we're going to go back around, and each one of you tell us a little bit about yourself and your opening position on why you think your particular specialty is the best next generation method. Steve.
Is this on? Can you hear me? Yeah?
Yes.
Well, I'm with my own independent consulting firm called Intuitive Consumer Insights these days. I was with NeuroFocus for several years. I had my own Neuro Marketing company for several years before that, so I've been in the field since about 2006. I guess the first thing I want to say, not to blunt the Lenny's desire for a food fight up here, but I'm kind of the Garrison Keillor school. All the children at Lake Wobegon are all above average, and I think that all of our methodologies are above average. So I'm not going to make a case for the unique preference for neuromarketing for all things and all occasions. I will say this. The brain is at the bottom of everything, so ultimately all marketing is neuromarketing. I think somebody said that at one point. And I think neuromarketing is here to stay. And the reason why it's here to stay is because marketers and advertisers and media folks, I would use the analogy of like the spectrum of light, the spectrum, the electromagnetic spectrum. It goes from very, very long and slow waves to very, very fast and short waves. We know that the visible spectrum of light is a very small slice in that wavelength. If you think of that as kind of the conscious part of the processing in our mind, small part of the spectrum, we know that the infrared exists because we can feel it. We can feel heat. We know that the ultraviolet exists because we can get a sunburn. We also know, obviously, that beyond that, even more extreme. As marketers come to realize that there's this full spectrum of processing and conscious and non-conscious ways in which consumers both take in information and determine how they're going to act. If you say, well, I only study this one little part of the spectrum, and I'm only going to give you that, and your competitor is saying, I'm going to give you the whole spectrum, human nature, folks are going to want the whole spectrum. So that's why I think that neuromarketing is here to stay. I think neuromarketing has a lot of challenges, which I'll be happy to talk about. But I think we've seen a lot of progress, and I would say we're in a second generation of neuromarketing. I think in the early days there was a lot of oversell, there was a lot of snake oil, excessive claims. I think that set the field back. But now I'm seeing a new generation of vendors, and many, many vendors that are coming out now, very scientifically precise, very transparent in their methodologies, constantly trying to fit what they're doing with real business outcomes and results. And some of the old vendors that are still with us are also becoming more and more business-oriented, showing more and more practical results. So I think it's an evolution that is moving in the right direction. So I guess that's my case for neuromarketing.
Thank you. Tom.
Thank you. Tom Anderson, founder of Anderson Analytics and our text analytics software, Odin Text. Back in 2005, when I founded Anderson Analytics, it was the first market research company to leverage text analytics, and now text analytics has come into play. And one of my fellow panelists here will be talking about social media monitoring, which of course relies on text analytics. For the purposes of this debate, and in fact what we do, I'm going to focus on text analytics everywhere else. So first, in terms of why text analytics is the most important next-gen methodology, they say that 80% of all data has been generated in just the past 2 years. If you look at all the data from the beginning of time that we have. And this is a trend that is expected to continue as more and more data gets added, over 7 million web pages every day. The majority of this data is not in structured numeric format. It's in unstructured text format, 80% in fact. So when we're talking about text analytics, what we're really talking about is data mining. It's synonymous with text mining, which is synonymous with text analytics. They're all synonyms. So what we're talking about is math. So if you're asking whether or not text analytics is important, is like asking whether or not math is important for market research. In terms of differentiating for the purposes of this debate from social media monitoring, I think it's 80% of it is tweets, 140 character bits, representative of just 8% of the population. Very specific outliers, in my opinion. For most brands, it makes no sense to analyze tweets. That's why I start out.
All right.
I'm Mark. I'm a mobile-holic.
Hi, Mark.
Hi, Lenny. I run the MMRA, the Mobile Marketing Research Association, and Threads Qualitative Global Consultancy. So I really only have a couple of questions. First of all, does anyone here have a mobile device with you right now? All right. Have you used it today? Do you know how to use it? Is it smarter than you? All right. Well, there's 4 questions there. But second thing I just want to point out is, where has all the investment money been going? Okay, so that's sort of my starting position. Really, I don't even know if I belong in a fight, because mobile is a channel. Mobile is a ubiquitous thing. It supports, it provides text, it provides social, it provides MROC communities, it provides brain things, because now it's getting into biometrics and all kind of things that can hook into it. So really, it's sort of become a ubiquitous connecting thing between people and our clients and us. And I'll pass it on.
Thanks, Mark.
Thank you. My name is Michalis Michael, and I'm the CEO of Digital Damar. Yeah, it's like some of you said, it's going to be difficult to argue that there's one methodology that is the next generation methodology. As a matter of fact, we also do private online communities, so I could argue both cases, and we do text analytics, so 3 cases, we do mobile research. So yeah, I think what I will say though, defending the social media listening corner, which is how I prefer to call it, is that there are 3 sources of information. One is asking questions, and that's surveys, focus groups, and that has been around for a long time. That's what market research has been up to now. Then there is tracking behavior. That also has been around for some time in our industry, ComScore, for example. But the third bucket of information and serious source, and we have Procter & Gamble saying, you all know the quote from 2 years ago from Joan at the ARF conference, where she said, by 2020, we believe that we will be spending most of our budget in listening as opposed to surveys. That she said that very clearly. Now, if this is happening today, I don't know. Maybe some of you do have this information, but I think this whole conference, is giving me a lot of comfort, and that social media listening is starting to become a mainstream platform for researchers in our industry. So I'll leave it at that, and maybe just repeat that there's only 3 sources of information: behavior, asking questions, listening. Listening is definitely the new kid on the block, and so the next generation, the supreme next generation platform. And over to you, Niels.
All right, thank you. I'm Niels. I'm co-founder and managing partner of Insights Consulting, and I head the New York office of our company. First of all, thank you very much for considering me as a thought leader on MROCs. And let me start by saying I hate the acronym MROCs. I don't know who coined it, but it makes me... Well,
blame them.
Yeah, okay, Forrester, good job. They probably never ran one. But what it makes me think of is orcs from The Lord of the Rings. And you know those characters hate everybody, including themselves. So I really don't like that term. So for me it's about, we call it the Consumer Consulting Board, and there's a lot of truth in that name because it's about deep engagement with human beings. And that brings me to a couple of differentiations. As has been said, every method has its place, I think. When I compare it, though, I think I do have an advantage, and I agree with Mark. Communities are probably the only standalone method that can function as a whole. We use mobile all the time, but for a specific purpose, for sending out people on a location, for doing things that you can't do behind a desktop computer. If we have large communities, we perfectly could do text analytics. We often run social media monitoring on the side. We run surveys on the side, and pull those findings back in. We do a lot of implicit measurement. I have never plugged people up to a device, so I can't really talk about neuro marketing. But we've done a lot of implicit measurement, and it's actually very enlightening to do that with participants and then throw it back and get the discussion going. So, I could use all of you guys, but I do think I'm the only holistic method that has all the freedom I can have. Because, for example, text analytics, you're sitting on the data that you have, and I could go either way. I could go sit on other data. I could, really gear based on the input that I get. And then finally, I'm the only one who wrote a book about my method, which is called So if you want a copy, just get in touch with me.
Yeah, with a forward by me.
Exactly.
So, yeah. Yeah, I didn't know you were going to do that. All right. So, what's interesting is that these technologies, when we look at the GRIT report, and as we track the adoption of new approaches, these are all the top approaches, other than neuromarketing, which is really interesting. Neuromarketing is at the bottom of the barrel from an adoption standpoint. I think there's a lot of reasons for that in terms of scalability and cost and some of the stake oil folks and all that good stuff. But yet, I'll share a tidbit with you guys. Why we want to include neuromarketing here is when we look at the client-side interests. I think you all know that at these events we try and align people based upon their interests. And all of the non-conscious measurement, that whole category of everything, is generally of the highest interest most of the time to clients. So we do think that although it may not hit critical mass in terms of widespread adoption, that it certainly is from an interest perspective. So
yeah, I think
go ahead, Steve.
Lenny and I started talking about this when I noticed that every GRIT survey, whether it's come out twice a year or for what, 3 or 4 years now, every GRIT survey has 10% of companies are using neuromarketing right now, but 25% are planning to use it in the near future. And then the next GRIT survey comes out, and 10% are using neuromarketing, but 25% are planning to use it And the next one comes out, it's 10%, 25%. So either those 10% are very, very loyal customers, and the 25% are just lying through their teeth, because we all know how surveys have that problem. Or there's a worse yet scenario, is that there's a rotating a group of 10% that are using it every year, being disappointed and dumping it, and the next 10% of suckers come in the next year. I think, and I wrote a couple of blog posts for the Green Book blog on that. There's a number of reasons why I think neuromarketing has failed to move into the mainstream. It's an early adopter, still an early adopter kind of technology. So in the classic kind of crossing the chasm model of technology adoption, I think it's still in the early adopters. It needs to market itself much differently to be appealing to the mainstream. And briefly what I said was that it needs to become much more scalable, and I think that's happening with a lot of the online eye tracking, facial recognition solutions that are out there. Several folks are here at the show talking about their solutions. It needs to become more transparent. I think that's definitely happening. The black box, a lot of people thought they could sell this stuff by saying, I wrote a black box, and I'm not going to tell you what's in it, but would you please give me $150,000 per project to tell you the answer to things, and I'm not going to tell you how I got it. Surprisingly, that marketing approach was not particularly successful, and most vendors are now much more transparent and open about what they're doing and educating their clients, so there's an increase in education. A lot of neuromarketing was not associated with choice and business solutions and choice and actions. So it was, well, I just measured your brain and you're having a lot of attention. Well, thank you very much, but am I going to buy the product or not? And that's also getting much better. And finally, kind of going with the theme of this show is a language gap between neuromarketing and insights. So when I sit with insights teams, they're not using the language of the brain and non-conscious and conscious processes and triggers and activations. They're often still talking in the traditional kind of language. So there's a language barrier that needs to be crossed. I think those things are all moving in the right direction, but they're not quite there yet. I also, in the show here, kind of made the opposite case, that I also believe a problem is marketers are not going to get the full advantage of what we call neuromarketing, and I hate the name of that as much as you hate the MROCs, until they start asking the right questions. And if you try to use neuromarketing measures to answer the same old questions, you're not really taking advantage of the capabilities. So sort of like in the early days of internet advertising, when people just tried to take their TV ads and stick them on the internet, didn't understand the difference between the media. So those are some of the challenge I think that's holding neuromarketing back.
But don't some of the same challenges exist for social media and for text analytics? I mean, there's really some corollaries. I think that we're looking at from adoption standpoint, there is greater adoption, absolutely. But if they hit critical mass, I think arguably I would say that the only method here that is, I think, hit wide acceptance is the orcs of Middle Earth that Neil's talked about, of communities. Other methods are still gaining ground, but still kind of missing the boat, especially the one that's like the no-brainer. We've been saying for years, this is the mobile tipping point. This is the mobile tipping point. This is the mobile tipping point. Yes, it's the year of mobile, and which I think we actually did reach the tipping point, and it's there already. But it seems as if the value, the business use case value for a lot of these methods are still not fully defined. And I would even argue that in the case of the community, it's time for the next generation of communities. It's time. Greg Heiss, Greg's in the audience, and he wrote a piece last week on Green Book blog about Community 2.0. So another plug for the blog. You should read that. So anyway, Tom, what are the barriers of widespread adoption of text analytics? Why is it not the survey? Why is it not as ubiquitous as the survey today if it is the end-all, be-all master method?
Well, it's more widespread than you see, first of all. So I mean, this goes by different names, Semantic Web, so forth. Google is using it, AdWords, in a number of ways. All of us use Google search engines, LexisNexis. A lot of these things have been around for a while. We're doing voice to text, text to voice. And it's in mobile. Yes, I agree with you when you said, mobile's been has been a buzzword for too long and just hasn't materialized. I would ask the same people, what percentage of your research is really mobile today? And how many of you like to take a survey on mobile? And how much data do you actually get in those few times that you do mobile? Text analytics, you're right. I mean, it is, when I started in 2005, nobody knew what the heck it was in terms of market research. In 2007, there was a lot of interest, especially after social media came on. So social media has pushed awareness now to ubiquitousness. And a lot of the early stuff was unfortunately, especially in social media monitoring area, was a bit hokey and primitive, and still is. But there are, more and more, we're bringing out case studies that you can't dispute the value, and we're going to see more of that. It used to be that text analytics was talked about as a single methodology almost. And for instance, Gartner had a report, Who's Who in Text Analytics. The last time they put that out was 2 years ago. Why? Text analytics is more important now than it was 2 years ago. It's because what I thought would happen happened. Some of these early companies were claiming to say, hey, we do it all. We're enterprise text analytics. Throw us all your unstructured data and we'll make sense out of it. Nonsense. You can't do that. Would you throw all your numeric data into one machine and expect anything intelligent to come out?
Well, that's big data. What? It doesn't work that way?
No, exactly. So you don't have your accounting data. Anyway, so what we're seeing is very specific use cases. The trying to search for a terrorist or fraud takes specific expertise and algorithms and training data that completely different than what we're doing here in marketing research. So what we've seen is a migration to very specific use cases, but all of it is text analytics, but it's being applied by very different ways by experts, and you need to have an expert that's concentrated in applying it in your area.
But Tom or Michaela, sorry, isn't the problem of text analytics and social media monitoring that, taking the movie analogy a step further, it's like life's like a box of chocolates. You never know what you're going to get. Isn't that one of the issues? Like, you're sitting on these thousands of posts and text pieces, and yes, we're going to run some analysis, but you don't really know what you're looking for. Isn't that an issue? I'm just reflecting on I have some experience in the area too, but.
Well, that's the beauty of it.
Of course, but isn't it also a difficulty for adoption, because it's like going to a restaurant. You only know once you've been there how good it is. So I'm not saying it's not a good thing, but isn't it the difficulty and the threshold to overcome for adoption?
Let me clarify something. I'm not sitting here saying that we should only listen. I totally buy that we should listen and we should ask questions and then listen a little more and probe a little more and go back and forth and also track some behavior. Now, text analytics, we do text analytics too. I mean, maybe the social media monitoring tools that have been developed for PR managers don't know how to do that. That's why they have sentiment accuracy below 60%. But somebody like us, focused on market research, our sentiment accuracy is much higher than that. It's 85 to 90%, depending on who is validating this. So I quite like the idea of unsolicited comments, but big data, terabytes of data, throw some algorithms at them, not knowing what will come back, and then surprise, something unexpected. Whereas I guess the little criticism on the asking questions side is that you predefine what information you're going to get. And if you don't ask a question, then you don't get the answer.
Well, I think sentiment accuracy is
did
a
that
pet
because the
peeve of
script
mine.
Sorry, the script said we had to fight. Sorry.
I don't think you can make any claims about sentiment accuracy, and I've frankly, I've seen that stop being used anywhere else than in academia, and that's because academics, are data poor. They're usually just looking at one single data set that they got access to, and then they split it in half and they do some training and make those comparisons. But if you're selling software, how can you possibly make any claims on accuracy if you're selling that same software for different client, completely different data sources, different data sets? So I think we're moving away. That's just not the way you can talk anymore about accuracy, and that's why it has to be specific. So, but I agree with you. It very much depends on data source, and so unstructured data. Yeah, you can go for a mining expedition. There's some value to that, and that's what's done with Twitter data and so forth. But there are far more interesting types of data out there where you don't have to go on just fishing expeditions and boil the water. A lot of you have customer service satisfaction or other types of surveys that your customers get after they purchase your product. The text comments there have tremendous predictive value in not just predicting all your other Likert scales of your 2-page long boring survey, but you can predict sales. You can predict return behavior, real things. And text analytics also incorporates, by the way, things from neuroscience. I mean, in terms of word choice, for instance, we can get into psychological attributes and understand emotion and predict behavior based on the intricacies in how you express yourself, and with strong validation from hundreds and thousands of academic studies in psychology that have been using this methodology for quite some time. So yes, you're not limited to boiling the water. It's really a question of how good your data is. Customer service, call center logs, emails. You have very specific things that you want to find out. How was my price change perceived in the market? Are people really upset about it, or are they just saying that? Those are the kind of questions that can be answered with text analytics.
Using the analogy of water, let's pretend, or use the analogy that data is all water, okay? So, and we are all fishermen trying to make sense out of how to fish. Anyone here ever fish? There's a huge difference between going whaling and going trout fishing. If you're going to go get some shrimp or get a sponge, you have to have an intent in mind for the kind of water you want to source. So data source is everything. You can get a box of chocolates, but then making sense of it later is a challenge. Certainly, if you're building a software company or some other type of tool, then you're selling a hammer. The whole world's a nail. All right. So that's obviously you've got an investment there. But when you look at data itself as being water and you have an intent to go out and get there, mobile sort of helps you classify this stuff in advance. The other challenge I've got is, to me, big data is a large video file, and I haven't figured out a way to automate any kind of analytics around that, especially photographs as well. Picture's worth 1,000 words. Give me some words on that sometime. I'd love to figure a way to do that, because that's what mobile is delivering, is pictures, videos, voice, all types of data. As a matter of fact, there's 24 to 25 sensors in mobile devices right now. That's first generation, folks. Second generation is going to have more like 40 to 50, and they're more biometric sensors. There's more immediate environmental sensors. So as we, as researchers, try to use these tools to go fishing, we better have a good intent as well as know how to not catch ourselves on the hooks in the process.
So I want to stop for a second and get see if the audience has any questions so far. Yes.
So you mentioned that accuracy.
I am. It's for the video, so everybody can hear you
So
forever.
much pressure. You mentioned accuracy is not really being used anymore, but as that measure. But it's really hard when we're trying to sell in us using text analytics or bringing new technology to our customers without having that kind of measure. So it makes me feel more confident with the social media monitoring, where you can say 85 to 90% accuracy, whereas I can't necessarily go and say, well, I don't know an accuracy score. What do I use instead? That's kind of my question. Does that make sense? How am I supposed to sell that in without having...
This is an excellent question.
you ever done a coding frame, you know that the proper way to do something by hand is develop a code frame, right? You start reading through the comments, 300 or so comments, and then you develop a code frame. Most code frames are like 20 likes and 20 dislikes, and then you start applying them. And you get back to comment number 500, and you realize your code frame is off. Are you gonna change those codes? Probably not. You're going to continue with this inferior code frame. Text analytics has the ability to look at everything, consider everything, if done properly with the right software. And so it's a complete
You mean with Odin
sentence.
text?
Huh?
With Odin text, right?
Well, yes, our tool does that. But I'm sure there's others that do that, hopefully. So those are the kind of things you have to do. But I mean, even with sarcasm is another thing that you hear mentioned, and you have to explain to your customers why the software should be useful. And it shouldn't be any comparison to human coding because that's inferior to begin with. So sarcasm, can a human coder detect sarcasm? No. I mean, I can't detect my own sarcasm in my own tweets a week from now, It could be.
Now I get it. Now I understand why we go back and forth often. So you don't even know you're being a jerk.
Hint, it's
Gosh,
like
now I
90% sarcasm.
We're friends, by the way. Michaelis, talk in defense of sentiment.
I'd like to take this debate a notch up and make it a real debate, to follow your example, okay? So we're talking here about next generation methodology, all right? So mobile is previous generation. It's already there. Everybody's doing it. It's fine. It's great. Mobile research is fantastic, but it's not next generation. MROCs is current generation, 5 billion. 5 billion out of the 50, according to my information.
Very appealing to Gen Y.
Sure,
Next
but it's
generation.
current generation. What's next generation? It's obvious. It's social media listening. Text analytics is part of social media. So I'll put my arm around Tom, and we will argue the case together. And but I disagree on one thing. He said that 80% is Twitter. It's not always the case. There are cases and categories where Twitter is 30% of all the comments. And when we say all the comments, we mean blogs, forums, Facebook, Instagram, and it's not just social media. Wrong way to call it. It's web listening. It's not social media listening.
Well, it's the same people that tweet are the same people that blog, that same 10%.
No, it's not.
But here's another problem. Here's another problem with social media listening. The data has never become available to us. We talked about walled gardens years ago, and we were hoping, it would, yes, while Twitter is only 8 to 10% of population because, and they have very inflated numbers if you look at their website, but the problem is Facebook. Yeah, if that data was available, that would be awesome. But what is Facebook? How many of you have public Facebook pages? I don't even have that.
You comment on fan pages. Many people
Company
comment on
pages.
fan pages.
How many of you have commented on a company page in the last 3 months? So 4 people out of 50. So here's the problem with that also, is that the walled gardens never came down. The walled gardens are just getting walled up even further. There's going to be more legislation. But what's worse is, unlike what some of us might have expected, that Facebook and Google and so forth would be defending free data for us all to use for text analytics, the opposite is happening. They're closing that data up and making sure nobody can follow them. They already own it all. They don't want any competitors. So I think we're not going to have much social media data left to listen to. So we're going to have to look for our other data sources, many of which are more important. I love tomato juice in the morning. Campbell Soup makes tomato juice. I have never tweeted about my V8 drinking. Yet, Campbell Soup has millions of customers contact them every year. Take the time, real customers, via telephone or email. Very important source of data from real customers as opposed to 140-character tweets from who knows who.
Yeah, but so myself as a customer, if I lose my cable, I tweet it. If I have a problem on the plane, I tweet it. So that transition, so I hear you and agree with you, but from a personal experience standpoint, I think more and more people are becoming accustomed to utilizing those open channels, not just Twitter, but other channels, to communicate with brands when they have problems. I know when my cable goes out, I will get a response within minutes on Twitter.
But if I may, one of the things I see is that when you use social media listening, which is indeed a much better term, and you use it for insight generation in the true sense of the word, like you're basically gambling on the long tail of the Gauss curve, if it has that. If you use it for monitoring campaigns, or for what you say, for looking for peaks in problem detection, or the other side, when you're really excited, I know I will tweet it too. Something great in the positive or the negative, that's what comes up there. And I think we should be looking for social media monitoring to find its place in that space. And my personal feeling is that apart from pharma, which is a big exception because they are satisfied with a small bit of consumer data, apart from that, there's so many other rich methodologies that go and seek for that big insight. So it's hard to find on social media. But I think we should just use social media what it's good for, which is tracking peaks and things happening, experiences, campaigns, that kind of stuff.
So,
Yeah, go ahead, Steve. Your turn.
yeah, Lenny, you reminded me that probably half of my Twitter feed is tweets from Lenny. There's another dimension on top of this, which is, what's the reception? What's the cognitive response? What's the right amount of tweeting? What's too much tweeting? What's not enough tweeting? How does that affect your credibility? And so on. Now, I have to say, every tweet from Lenny is an inspiration and an educational experience. But
Especially Godzilla.
Perhaps others might go a little bit overboard, and those responses are often not articulated. I wanted to sort of reinforce something that Tom said that I thought was really important. Is this idea of specialization. As these technologies evolve over time, and I think this goes for all these technologies, they tend to move into more specialized niches where they're developed for a specific purpose. And one of the ways in which you can tell that a technology has arrived is it's no longer in the title. So I am a fraud detection company. I am a terrorist identification security company. I'm not a text mining company anymore. I think if you look at neuromarketing, the techniques and the insights from brain science that are relevant to neuromarketing, to brand management, product innovation, packaging, advertising, media, entertainment, in-store marketing, online marketing, they're all different. They're all areas of specialization. So we're starting to see companies that are focusing in those substantive areas that are using these various technologies under the hood. And one other point is that there are some very generalizable technologies and scientific advances that I think underlie all these areas. So academic work in pattern recognition, in machine learning, in neural networks, genetic algorithms, all of these areas are developing a new kind of infrastructure that is going to continue to animate and improve all of these fields. So I think we're all on similar trajectories. And one last point is that each of these areas can learn, we can all learn from technologies that are a little further along the adoption curve than we are. Text analytics is a lot further along than neuromarketing is. And so there's a lot to be learned. Yes. There's a lot to be learned about both the successes and the obstacles that those fields have run into, and we can learn from the folks that are out ahead of us, have been in the game longer.
From the gray-haired corner over here.
There's two corners.
Yeah, I see. We got him cornered, or circled at least. When you think about research and providing intelligence to our clients, we're doing it for a reason. We're doing it to help them sell more stuff ultimately, or make something better, or change something that they need to change, right? An improvement. Does everyone agree? I mean, it's, generally you don't want to help them decrease sales. So one of the key things is getting that information to them on a timely basis at the place where it makes a difference. And that's something I think that mobile does uniquely compared to anything else, is that we can send out any number of information directly to the front line to make a change. We can monitor exactly what conditions are happening in any given environment, both from a sentiment perspective as well as a behavioral perspective as well as a passive perspective. And you can see that stuff happen in real time, and we can actually make that available to our clients to alert them of problems that maybe arise in the field or opportunities. And that's happening real time every day right now. Now, when you say that we're old-fashioned or maybe we're already adapted, I think that's maybe among researchers, that there's not a high adoption rate among researchers because we are still selling hammers and nails. Welcome to my tent, or my religion, whatever. But the clients themselves are actually leapfrogging over us. And I think that's something we need to pay attention to as researchers, that they're going direct to mobile. And in many cases, they're blending the line between marketing and research altogether by going in their own apps.
I would say just because a source or media channel is important for marketing, and I don't argue that mobile isn't. I don't argue that social media isn't extremely important for marketing. Reaching influencers on Twitter, people who blog, and getting them to blog about your product. And so maybe specifically how to generate more SEO or get influencers to do something for you might be a good thing. And getting your videos or whatever out via mobile. But that's not the same as getting useful, extremely useful information for insights. That's where I'm not seeing, and I haven't seen case studies. I attend, over 20 conferences per year. Not yet found one good social media presentation that I was impressed by. Use case, I don't know.
Have you been to mine?
No.
I was going to say the same thing. If I can make a coalition here, for me, what you said, Mark, is correct. I would even go one step further. It's up to us researchers to come up with a solution that fits the purpose. And we just completed a community for Quinny, stroller brand, global community, and it was all about how do urban parents interact with the city. How do they, what's their mobility? And all of a sudden, these young couples get a child, and their city changes, or at least their interaction with the city changes. So 90% of what we wanted to know couldn't be answered after behind a desktop computer. So we send out people throughout the city. The thing they had to do is they take tons of pictures and videos, upload it, tag it, short notes, and then when they came home, the task was to complete and enrich what they just did. We did some meta-analysis on this, and actually the people that used our mobile app more than the heavy users compared to the low users actually contributed double the amount of text, double the amount of visuals. Their engagement and satisfaction was uplifted. So for me, mobile's it's a very good ally for communities. The same with text analytics and social media monitoring, putting them on the same pile here. We completed a study for Danone, and it was called My First Meal. And Danone had a product which was confidential, or a product concept on that should be a replacement or close to breastfeeding. So what we did is we scraped part of the web. We purposefully sampled our websites, and let's say about 80% of our information needs were covered by the social media listening, if you want. But there was this critical other 20% that what we did is we invited people from the social media into a community. We dug deeper, and especially that concept that they had, which obviously we couldn't throw out in the public. That's what we studied in the community. So again, that for me is an ally too, with a specific purpose. This is a call maybe as being the technology that's further advanced, and that I agree also has to reinvent itself, is a call to Neuro Marketing to come along in the slipstream of this, because I haven't been able to figure out how to use that. And it's definitely an important methodology because, I don't know if you're aware, but the ARF has a whole set of primary academic solid research out on the topic. So it's definitely important. But I think what it's missing is some of the context and the qualitative behind it. So if it could be used easily, I would love to experiment with it.
Hold on, sorry, Steve, 1 second. I want to go, we're 15 minutes in, or I'm sorry, we have 15 minutes left, not 15 minutes in. So see if there's any more questions or comments from the audience. All right, we got 2.
Amazon Fire Phone just announced they're going to be out July 25th. Samsung and Apple comes to the panel. Help me understand what my current users are thinking. Am I going to be damaged by this? Do I have a problem? Talk through the reality of that type of real case study in front of you today and how you would use your methodology to go solve the problem that Samsung and Apple are both dealing with, knowing that it was announced about 4 hours ago.
And that's is that their 3D phone?
That's the third phone coming out July 25th.
Yeah, that has the 3D screen. Amazing. So there we go, use case. So apply each of your approaches to address that business issue, that oh shit.
It could almost be as revolutionary as 3D TV. And we actually did some studies on neurological response to 3D TV, and we found absolutely no benefit in terms of any greater emotional engagement or cognitive engagement, because guess what? Our brains are used to dealing with 3D. It's like no big deal. So brains didn't seem to be too impressed by that. Maybe we'll see something like that happening. I guess I wanted to, it's not a direct answer, sorry. I was kind of thinking ahead of your question. Perhaps I'll get back to it at the end. But I did want to say that, so I want to keep a little advocacy here since Lenny wants some advocacy. Neuromarketing, you have to remember, we're like Intel. Neuromarketing is inside everything. The brain is inside everything. Now, any methodology, I'm going to encompass all my friends up here, any methodology that deals with the output of cognitive processes that appear either as the written word or the spoken word or the tweeted word, come through a very long causal process in the brain. You start off with, our perceptions are highly biased and we fill in a whole lot of stuff. We don't even literally see what we think we see. Our brains are filling in a lot of perception. Then we go to applying meaning and value to those perceptions. And again, we fill in our life experience. We fill in a lot of unique things that each of us has in terms of our experience, our associations, our expectations, our values, our beliefs, and so on. Then maybe, if we're lucky, we engage in some deliberation. And we think about what we're going to do. And then we do it. Then we speak. So when you talk about listening, you have to consider that thing that you're listening to is the output of a long process that occurs in the brain and can occur in different ways. Now, if you're treating that as an independent variable and you're trying to predict things from that, everything's fine as long as your predictions are accurate and precise and you're getting the results that you expect. But as soon as things start to deviate and the prediction is not at 100%, not at 90%, maybe not even at 50%, then you have to go back and ask what went on in those people's brains that produced that deviation from our expectation, our understanding of what they said, what they wrote, what they did. If that's not matching up with the real dependent variables that you're interested in, you've got to go back and understand the causal process that led to those. So that's the fundamental value proposition for neuromarketing. And
Can I answer your question or try to? I don't know how I'm going to react to it. For me, technology is a feature, and I still have to figure out what the benefit's going to be. But I'm not scared at all. I think the 3D phone is tremendous, and if it doesn't go anywhere like the 3D TV for now, then
if Samsung and Apple came to you and said, oh my goodness, they just launched the Amazon Fire, how can you help me understand what impact that's going to have to my business? Basically,
okay.
30 seconds, what case study, that's a case study, how would you now react to Apple and say, I want your business, I can help you solve the problem?
I thought you were mentioning
Yeah.
what's the 3D phone going to do for market research. Okay, good. Well, I would just, give it to people. I would actually first look at what their current behavior is with the phones, observe that, not asking many questions, give them the new technology, and then take it away again from them. So do some deprivation, activation type of things, and you would get a lot.
I got a really simple solution. I'd probably deploy a field agent, an army, whoever. I'd send out a whole bunch of people into the stores today to see what's going on at the store level, if those phones are actually out there now. I'd be in those stores when they are there, and I'd try to figure out what's going on with people's sentiment beforehand. I'd probably give it to a community, and then I'd have him do all the analysis on the text. I'd 3D print off a bunch of smart fabrics and make them into a Neuro helmet and give it over here to this guy. And then I'd give it all to Lenny and let him tweet about it.
I think that's the
Hey,
making
Collins,
of a
why don't you
great
go
company.
next and then I'll go.
I think he covered me.
Okay, good. So it's very nice. Thank you for asking a specific question, because we can all go on and on theoretically forever, and usually there's never training data available to make these predictions, and you need answers fast. But so you always want to put the question first and then think about what data is available. And so with text analytics, you're not limited just to numeric data.
All right.
Start the violins. So what data might be best here? We have lots of options technically. I mean, large-scale discussion boards. I don't know if that ties into social media monitoring, but there's fanboys for every brand. And there's these large discussion boards. You could screen scrape those. These are not tweets, which most social media monitoring is going on. These are people who have registration. They've made several posts over several years. And we can compare that to sales going back. Well, what about that last launch? What were they talking about then? What words did they use? We can build a model to predict based on how these early innovators are reacting to the news about this brand. That's one. Other sources of data, possibly. We can look at the media, Wall Street Journal, New York Times, or whatever specific publication. We can look at that, analyze that using text analytics to also predict and triangulate that way. If we have time and money to do both, we can use that. We can also use survey data with open ends. Rather than just asking questions like purchase intent on a 5 or 10 point scale, which is relatively unreliable in isolation, if we also ask an open end and we look at not just what they're saying in each of these cases about specific attributes, so that's obviously valuable as well, but we also look at emotional content. What words are they using to describe that? Is it an indication of excitement, anger, fear, all of that, and very much tied to other variables. Once you turn text to numbers with text analytics, then you're really doing data mining with combination, ideally, of structured and unstructured data, and you can do a lot of predictive analytics.
Greg, do you have a question?
I want to
Anybody else?
answer.
Steve?
I want to.
We got to keep it short, though.
Very
buddy.
short. What I would do is I would do sensory experience testing in order to determine kind of the physiological reaction that people had. With 3D TV, for example, people actually got nauseous. They had muscle strain in their necks. You can test all of that. So I would tell Apple or Samsung that let's look at the sensory experience. If there's issues there, that's going to be fundamental to the adoption, the likelihood of widespread adoption. So I do that kind of testing.
Okay. Greg.
So if we want to loop this back to client needs, if a client asked you your methodology for the future, is it a vitamin or is it a painkiller? In one sentence, how would you answer that?
One sentence in 30 seconds.
It's definitely both. Listening, because you're managing risk, reputation risk, and you find nuggets that you can use for growth.
Okay. Niels?
It's a vitamin. it's a vitamin because it's going to generate extraordinary insights based on everyday life experiences.
Hey, Mark.
Good question. I'd have to say painkiller for certain things and vitamin for other things. There's the idea of sentiment. There's the idea of passive. There's the idea of quant. So it's a little bit broad for me as mobile. But I would say that in general, with having the ability to reach into everyone's personal space all times, you can either cause pain or you can cause growth.
Okay. Tom, go ahead.
It's math. What is math? A vitamin or a painkiller? It's the solution to the problem. So maybe it's the solution so you don't need a painkiller and maybe you don't need a vitamin.
Steve.
Neuro Marketing's greatest strength is diagnostics. So usually there's a problem, and the traditional expectations are not being met. So something's going on, and you have to drill down. So I suppose to that extent, it's ultimately more of a painkiller than a vitamin. At least that's the way it tends to be used.
Well, it sounds like it's maybe more of an X-ray. So to help
There you
determine, or fMRI.
I didn't know I was allowed to extend the analogy. So.
Yeah. All right. Question. Where? Yes. Please. Yeah. Hold on 1 second.
So I don't know if we have time for my question actually, but it's 20 years from now, and this panel is up here. What's the new next gen thing, stuff that's up there? Like a Watson computer's up there? What's up there?
That's a good question. That's how I was going to wrap up too. So there we go. So you've built your businesses on each of these methods, but disruption occurs. What are you watching? What keeps you up at night? You think, you know what, I'm going to have to go down this path to continue to build my business so I'm still here 5 years from now. So, Michaela.
For us, we are currently doing unstructured text. So the next thing for us is to be able to analyze video clips and images the same way.
Yeah. All right, Mark?
Point of singularity and Internet of Things.
Yeah.
I think it gets more complex, and we're trying to help people deal with complexity. And when things get more complex in terms of what they can do, so does usability as in complexity. So keeping it simple. We want to make people data scientists, so that'll be a continuous struggle, but I think we're going to make it much easier for more people to be much more efficient.
Okay. Steve?
Well, I stopped making predictions at least 20 years ago. I have absolutely no idea what's going to happen in 20 years, and I stand by that. But I suspect that there will be an increase in the ways in which we are being tracked and across all modalities. Not just when we type today, we type into the internet, and that information is everywhere. I think what we say, what we do, are all going to be subject to various kinds of sensors and tracking. That's going to create. I think it also goes to the Internet of Things. Data mountains of exponentially larger magnitude than anything we see today.
Yeah.
And computing power to be able to process.
Yeah.
Two things in 5 years from now. Definitely what Michaela said. I think he said that very well. We're looking at numbers and text. We are so underusing the power of visuals and video. So I think we're in the same line of thinking there. And 20 years from now is really hard. Not sure if I'll be sitting here. Unless Lenny invites me.
It's open. It's done. 20 years from now.
Okay, good. I'll take your word on it. I think it's going to be more sensorial. If you think about what IBM is trying to do with computers transmitting other things than voice and vision, but also smell and the whole augmented reality evolution. I think that's going to be for 20 years from now. I don't know, maybe 30, maybe 15. Who knows? But in the next wave, mid-long, I definitely bet my money on visuals and video.
Right. Yes.
Sorry?
We're going to have to talk about that later, Nicole, because we have another panel, and then it's the end of the day in the conference. So, but But
assuming Terminator's not coming back.
that's assuming the Terminator isn't coming back. Yes, yes. All right. Thanks, everybody.
Thank
Very
you.
much. Appreciate it.